for today's presentation is Humanizing the Business, a legal analysis on business and human rights law in the 21st century. So I would like to begin with a small quote. So this is by Mary Robinson, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. One of the greatest ironies of this period in history is that just as technology remakes our world, the need to maintain the human dimension of our work and a company's sense of its social responsibility is growing at an equally rapid pace. So basically, like, this highlights as to the need to humanize the business activities, because as the companies are starting to use technology more and more, the companies are becoming more technical, or rather like mechanical. So like you need to increase the human aspects of those business entities in order to protect human rights and possible exploitations of labor. So basically, I would like to give you a small outline as to what I would be talking about. First, there will be a small introduction, and then I'm going to talk about the human rights issues in the business environment. So there are two categories, as internal and external. And then I'm going to look at the new developments in international law that address business and human rights issues. So my main focus was with regard to the last decade, last 10 years, and then I'm going to look at new developments in national laws that address business and human rights issues. And also then I'm going to briefly explain the situation in Sri Lanka and how we can improve our legal system. So firstly, just to begin with, basically we all know what human rights are. So those are rights which are inherent to all human beings. So the mere fact that you are a human being entitles you to enjoy these rights. So, and against whom do human rights provide protection? So normally if you look at the laws that says executive, you can use human rights against executive and administrative actions of state entities. So we need to look at why only state entities, why not private entities and private individuals. So one of the reasons for that is states, through their organs, exercise political power, which is one of the significant types of power. They exercise this power, and if you abuse it, it could produce grave repercussions and all that. So we could basically say that human rights was a mechanism which was invented some time back to protect the powerless from the powerful. So on broad terms. But 70 years ago, when UDHR was first drafted, the powerful, whose actions had the potential of making a drastic impact on the mankind, were mainly state organs with political power. But however, it's not the same thing today, because we are now here after a period of technological evolution and all that, and this evolution has paved the way for the creation of a new type of power, which is called economic power, mainly possessed by business entities. So we have multinational corporations and all that. So it has been identified that both political power and economic power are equally dangerous if you abuse them, because both are instances of control over the others. Therefore, we can see that there's a need to expand the jurisdiction of the human rights, which were once invented to protect the powerless from the powerful, to remedy the abuse of economic power businesses as well, because economic power is the main driving force in today's world. So now I'm going to look at some internal human rights issues. So these are internal because these mainly affect the people who are inside the business organization. So the first one we are going to look at is artificial intelligence and automation. So artificial intelligence is the technological part which would replace your brain basically, and automation would replace your function. So in a company, decision making positions are there, managerial positions and all this, that those could be replaced through artificial intelligence, and also blue collar workers could be replaced, and it is happening already, through replaced by automation. So in companies, for example, if you when you are small, if you have watched this movie called I think Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you may have. So in that you could see this happening to Charlie's father. He worked as a blue collar worker at a company, like toothpaste manufacturing company, and one fine day the company decided, okay, we are going to replace all the labor force with machine. So this gentleman, he lost his job, and after that, you know what happens is they get a like compensation package, but like how long is it going to like keep them alive for? That's the problem, right? So that is one of the issues here, and the second one is gig economy. So if you need a definition, it is basically a labor market, like a segment in economy, characterized by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs. So you could see this happening in Sri Lanka as well, how gig economy is taking over the transportation industry. Like if you have ever been on, I'm pretty sure, like in an Uber or like a Pick Me and all that, those are like businesses that operate under the principles of gig economy. So what happens is, like when it comes to gig economy workers, they are like classified as independent contractors rather than employees. So this category does not have any labor rights and entitlements. But like when you look at the nature of their work, like you could see that if you like apply all the tests and all that, control tests and all that these people are not entirely independent contractors. So that is the misclassification, but like due to this misclassification, they are losing all the entitlements. So there was this incident, like reported on newspaper, like abroad. This person called Don Lane, if I'm not mistaken, and like he died of diabetes because like he couldn't like go meet his doctor because there were certain appointments to meet the doctor. He applied for leave, but they didn't give him leave because like he has no leave entitlement since he's not an employee. So because of that, after missing so many like appointments, he died. So you could see that how fatal the results could be due to this misclassification. And also modern slavery. So basically, like slavery was abolished like a long time ago. But now, in today's society, due to the operation of multinational companies and all that, like in supply chains, you can see the use of forced labor, like how they like use forced labor to like manufacture goods. So if you take like your mobile phones, like it has been stated that like each and every one of those mobile phones that you are using, at least once like touched by a like slave, like person like who's using due to the due to forced labor. Like these people have been either abducted, like kidnapped and all that, or maybe like they have like they are from like very poor background. So because of that, these people are not given even the basic like employment benefits and all that, but they are being forced to work. So due to the lack of time, I'm going to rush through these. So external human rights issues are use of surveillance technology and environmental pollution. So like when it comes to surveillance technology, if you have watched the movie Snowden, or like if you know the story of Edward Snowden, who like leaked information with regard to like US like taking assistance of a private company to like tap into like all the social media networks and all that, like to collect information. So and also environmental pollution, I think like it's self-explanatory as like how it would affect. So now let's look at the new developments in international law that address business and human rights issues. So due to the lack of time, I have like around 1 minute. So basically, UN United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights of 2011. So these guidelines provide a three-pillar mechanism to prevent human rights violations by companies. But the thing is, these are guidelines, so they are not legally binding. So at the moment, discussions are taking place to draft a legally binding treaty, which would be like very useful. And the protocol to the Forced Labor Convention was adopted in 2014 to like enhance the implementation of the convention. And then we have the Paris Agreement to like deal with climate change and all that. So under environmental issues, I was supposed to like discuss as to like how like in industries contribute to global warming and all that. So this Paris Agreement of 2015 is the first universally adopted applicable legally binding agreement dealing with climate change. And then we have right to privacy. This is like not recent, like we had this in ICCPR as well, but recently like General Assembly resolution on right to privacy in the digital age of 2018, they identified the use of digital communication and surveillance technology as a violation of right to privacy. And in national laws also you could see these new developments with regard to modern slavery, like what they do is when it comes to companies that use supply chains, they ask them to comply with these transparency requirements. So basically these Transparency in Supply Chains Act of 2010 was enacted by the state of California in the USA, and Modern Slavery Act of 2015 was passed by the UK, and Modern Slavery Act of 2018 was passed in Australia last year. And when it comes to gig economy, there are so many cases which stated that in the UK stated that these workers are not independent contractors, but belong to a category which is in between independent contractors and employees, and this category is called workers. So the situation in Sri Lanka is like we could see that all these issues are prevalent in Sri Lanka, but the thing is legal regime is not that sufficient. So due to lack of time, I would say that based on those international legislations, we should develop our regime as well. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much for your presentation. So, right, we shall move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is talking to us about drones. So keep an eye out for anything in this one. So it will be presented by Ms. Nyaka. And she is a final year undergraduate at this university. She's obtained a diploma in diplomacy and world affairs from the Bandaraka International Global Training Institute. Her research interests include environmental law, IT law, IP rights, and human rights law. The paper is jointly authored, and I believe the joint author is in the audience here as well. We'll be partaking in the question and answer session. She is Ms. Kotelawala, who is also a final year undergraduate here, and her interests include IT law, criminal law, and human rights laws. So, over to you.
Good morning. I'm the chair and my learned audience. Today, I'll be presenting on drone technology in Sri Lanka, urgency for an effective legal framework. This is a pair research conducted with my co-author Rashmi Kulasekara. Let me move on to the topic. As we all know, technology plays an exceedingly prominent role in today's world that we have reached an age in which nothing could be achieved without technology. Among such various technologies in the world, drone technology is regarded as an impressive outcome. Just as any other technology, it has to be regulated by law, as drone technology poses a challenge to humankind regarding security, safety, and privacy. That is where legal frameworks have been introduced by countries to govern drones. Most countries are aware of drone utilization for their national interests, but mostly lack clear and strong laws and regulations to meet the needs of both drone operators as well as the civil society. Therefore, the research question in our research is whether Sri Lankan legal framework on drones is adequate to address the issues arising out of drones. Objectives of this research are to analyze the current legal system on use of drones, to identify the loopholes in the current legal framework on drones, to make recommendations for the effective implementation. In our research, legal research methodology was applied based on primary data such as legislation and case laws and secondary data collected from both legal and technological scholarly articles. First of all, let's see what is the definition of a drone. Drones, which are also known as unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned aircraft systems, are flying robots that can be remotely controlled or fly autonomously through a software-controlled flight plans in their embedded systems working in conjunction with onboard sensors and GPS. Simply saying, they are the aircraft without human pilots. Drones are mostly used for military purposes, photography, filming, construction, delivering goods, drone journalism, weather forecasting, and as a source of evidence to reconstruct crime scenes. In Sri Lankan history of drones, they had been firstly used in military operations. In addition, drones have proved useful in during times of natural disasters in the country, monitoring and tracking animals, for data collection in climate changes, in drone journalism, and construction planning and management. Some of the examples that depict the misuse of drones in Sri Lanka are a drone used to photograph the coverage around the exhumation of slain journalist Lasantha Wickramatunge's body, arresting of Maldivian flying drones near Bandaranaike International Airport, banning of use of drones during East attack period due to risk of terrorist attacks through drones. In discussing the existing legal regime on drones, the Civil Aviation Authority of Sri Lanka has introduced implementing standards under Section 120 of Civil Aviation Act number 14 of 2010 as standards number 53. These regulations are drafted in a manner to minimize the existing security threats, and these include drones with potential to violate privacy, needs permission from local police area, and restrictions being imposed upon airspace. Even though there are regulations to govern the operation of drones, there are heavy concerns about safety, security, privacy associated with drone operations. Drone raises important legal, technical, operational, and administrative issues facing their effective adoption. One such foremost consideration is the safety or security hazards that may pose to manned aircraft operations. When a drone flies near a manned aircraft, it can endanger manned aircraft operations by distracting pilots or may get ingested into the aircraft engines. Further, there is a high possibility for a drone to hit a commercial aircraft on runway. However, Sri Lanka has not adopted clear rules regarding the interferences made by drones to the commercial planes and choppers. Also, these regulations are often infringed by drone operators due to the lack of knowledge regarding privacy restrictions. As a result, many incidents are reported where right to privacy of public is violated by drone operators. The existing regulation seems to be incapable of covering all the privacy issues. Drone operators either have no knowledge as to the restrictions regarding privacy or they just don't obey these regulations. In Sri Lanka, number of incidents provide evidence as to these drones being used for various illicit activities such as drug trafficking. The regulation on drones in Sri Lanka does not provide clear restrictions on such activities. Also, the regulations on drones does not address other major security threats associated with drones such as terrorist attacks conducted through drones. Most importantly, these regulations does not provide any mechanism to grant compensation for the victims for the damages caused by drones. When moving on to the drone operator's perspective, implementing standards introduced by Civil Aviation Authority lays down a number of rules for drone operators, making it impossible for a drone operator to use a drone in Sri Lanka. If a drone operator gets into the drones as a hobby, as there is a thick blanket of bureaucracy, it will be cumbersome for that person to carry on his passion. This much of regulations for the licensing and operating drones inhibit drone applications from reaching their true potential. Most of the foreigners who expect Sri Lanka to be a friendly country have to go through various issues just to operate his drone in the country. Also, these regulations inhibit further development in this impressive technology in Sri Lanka. Then what are the recommendations for this? Since legislators who introduced laws on drones have not addressed in depth about aspects of drone usage in civil society, and as they are insensitive towards drone operators, they should introduce a stronger and effective legal framework than the one existing now, balancing both rights of operators and the public. Legislators should choose a property rights approach to aerial surveillance. This approach should provide the opportunity for landowners to exclude aircraft and other objects from a column of airspace extending from the surface of their land up to a desired limit above ground level. Also, legislators should recognize that technologies such as geofencing and auto-redaction can be used, and that will make aerial surveillance by drones more protective of privacy than human surveillance. Examples for developing the existing legal framework could be taken from countries such as Australia and France. In Australia, there exists a method for drone user to connect via a mobile application to file a flight plan request. And in France, there are units of armed forces and security services equipped with counter-drone systems. Accordingly, moving on to the conclusion, it can be concluded that Sri Lankan legal framework on drones is insensitive towards drone users and does not provide a satisfactory protection to public. Therefore, a proper and effective legal framework should be introduced covering almost all the aspects of drones. With that, it comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. That was particularly interesting. You didn't drone on whatsoever. Sorry. So we now go on from drones, and we'll now talk about e-contracts with the sale of goods. So our next speaker is Duragni Jayakala, and she's an attorney at law and probationary lecturer attached to the Department of Private and Comparative Law in the Faculty of Law at the University of Colombo. So she obtained her LLB as second-class honours upper division from the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo. Her research interests are environmental law, contract law, and intellectual property law. So I'll pass over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, all of you. My topic for today's presentation is the need to move towards e-contracts to sale of goods, drawbacks in the legal system of Sri Lanka. This presentation will be covered under these subtopics. The main object of the research intends to examine the importance to move towards electronic contracts for sale of goods in the 21st century and to analyze whether the law relating to e-contract for sale of goods in Sri Lanka have incorporated the modern developments. This paper also makes recommendations from the experience of the law relating to e-commerce in the UK and under the OECD guidelines. Before moving into the discussion part, I would like to point out or question what is contract for sale of goods. The contract is inevitably into the day-to-day life of every human being. Earlier, the needs of a man from others were almost less and restricted than at present. When man was uneducated, he created his own food and other things and exchanged with others for what he wanted from them. These commodity transfer contracts were known as barter contracts. However, the initiation and use of coins and cash have changed this form of contracts, and the goods for cash forms were developed. These types of contracts and transactions took place and taking place in the form of face-to-face transaction. At present, the advancement of technology and globalization have accelerated the use of electronic commerce contracts. Sale contracts basically creates a legally binding relationship between a buyer and seller for the purchase of good for an agreed value that is called consideration. Advancement of technology and globalization have accelerated the use of electronic contracts in today's world. Revolution in the electronic and technology field influenced the human being to turn as illiterate. The next point is what is the need for Sri Lanka to move towards e-contracts for sale of goods. In the modern world, sale of goods is the basic form of commercial transaction by which goods are supplied, bought and sold in the trade and commerce. People were tired with standing in queues for more time to buy goods and get their services done. However, the technological advancement has eased the day-to-day activity of the people. Sri Lanka is a developing country and attracted to more foreign direct investments. Therefore, it is important for the country to move along with the technological changes and needs to achieve development. When we look at what are the available or existing laws relating to contract for sale of goods in Sri Lanka, I would like to divide these into two different categories. One would be the traditional contract for sale of goods and the other one would be online contract or e-contract for the sale of goods. The law relating to sale of goods in Sri Lanka, as we all know, is English law. So for traditional contract for sale of goods, we apply the Sale of Goods Ordinance number 11 of 1896 with its amendments. Section 2 of this ordinance states what is a contract for sale. A contract whereby the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a money consideration called the price. When it comes to online contract for sale of goods, I couldn't find any specific law like Sale of Goods Ordinance for the online contracts for sale of goods. Therefore, it seems the same ordinance is being applied or applicable to the online contract for sale of goods. But since it is an online transaction, I found Evidence Special Provision Act, that is the very first law for e-transaction in Sri Lanka, and thereafter several other legislations were enacted. And hence I could find Information and Communication Technology Act, Payment and Settlement Systems Act, Electronic Transactions Act, the Payment Devices Fraud Act, the Computer Crimes Act. Even though we find the number of legislation being high, these legislations give only general protection for e-commerce and transaction but fail to provide special protection for the online contract for sale of goods. There is no special legislation to give protection from fraudulent sellers, protection for sale by description, mercantile quality, and protection of data privacy in the online contract for sale of goods in Sri Lanka. Since there is no separate legislation to deal with the sale of goods in electronic form, the rules under the Sale of Goods Ordinance are applicable to the online form of sale of goods as well. As we see, this ordinance is in application for the last 123 years since its implementation. Even though most of the sales are now taking place in the electronic form, the law is not yet amended to cope up with the new developments. Data shows in 2018, almost 6.8 million internet users were identified in Sri Lanka. This is 32% out of the total population. The biggest challenge in online contract for sale of goods, I'm not talking in general, I'm talking about online contract for sale of goods only. So the biggest threat or challenge is the identity of parties in an online contract is not visible as it is available in the traditional contract. I would like to stress the point why there is a barrier, why we cannot apply the Sale of Goods Ordinance existing in Sri Lanka to the online contract for sale of goods. The first point is Section 3 of the Ordinance requires the capacity and the general law of the buyer and seller to contract. As the identity, if the identity is visible, we can tell easily whether their capacity is okay to contract. But in an online contract, since the identity can be hidden, the parties are invisible, the e-contract, the validity of section 3 in application in online contract is questioned. Most of the online sales are taking place in the social media platforms as well. But there is no adequate law to regulate the online sale platform. Facebook doesn't have any mechanism to protect online consumers from fake ID sellers. This is from my very own personal experience. But the second problem is mercantile quality of the goods in an e-contract. Section 15, subsection 2 of the ordinance talks about sale by description, that is clearly provided there, and the case law is given. Section 16, 1 of the ordinance talk about sale by sample. So these two sections are very difficult to apply in an online contract as it is in traditional contract. Because in a traditional contract, the buyer will get a chance to physically see the goods and examine the goods and compare whether the sample is corresponding to the bulk. But in an online contract, it is not that much possible to examine the goods, or mostly in online contracts, the images are shown or displayed by the seller, and when the buyer buys the good, there is a discrepancy. Most of the consumers are not ready to take actions. Due to the time limitation, I need to rush through this. So the next issue is the data privacy in e-contracts. Before I go into this in detail, I would like to make a point that in this year, June I guess, if I'm not mistaken, there is a bill for data privacy, protection of data privacy was recommended. So in that bill also, I found that the data privacy was, the bill was not applicable for the individual consumers when they engage in online contracts. Their data are not necessarily protected by that bill also. Even though many of us wish to keep our personal and account details secretly, it is a basic requirement that you enter your data when engaging in an electronic contract. So for these problems, I found the recommendation from the Consumer Protection in E-Contract Sale of Goods in the UK. It is evident that the law relating to the sale of goods in Sri Lanka is based on English law. However, the United Kingdom has reached many heights in protecting the traditional as well as online consumers. There are new regulations created and enforced in the UK to protect the rights of the consumers when they buy products either on internet or by using the telephone. Three main legislation on regulating contracts for the sale of goods in the UK is the Sale of Goods Act, the Supply of Goods and Services Act, and the Unfair Terms in Consumer Contract Regulations. All these three legislations were modernized according to the change and needs of the society in 2015 by the Consumer Rights Act. Chapter 3 of this Act specially covers the digital content contracts. Another important and notable reach is the Consumer Contracts Regulation 2013, which has replaced the former distance selling regulations. This regulation applies for the sale of goods or services take place without the face-to-face contact with parties. The next recommendation is under the OECD Guidelines 1999. OECD has created separate legal protection for consumers in electronic commerce at the international level. It will be helpful for Sri Lanka to follow some of the important areas from the guideline in adopting fresh legislation in the online contract sale of goods. Principle 1 of the guideline, Principle 1, 5, 32 and 48 are specially made provisions to protect the consumers in online contract, especially in mercantile quality, data privacy. Those are discussed in given in the guideline. So this paper concludes by stating, introducing an appropriate law for protecting e-commerce contract for the sale of goods in Sri Lanka is paramount important to enhance the business in online market. Thank you.